What's going on, everybody? This is Mr. Diamond, and this is going to be a little bit different. There's no PowerPoint notes that goes with this, but these are notes. And this is going to be a couple of tips that you can use to try to help you figure out what type of compounds you are dealing with. I've mentioned before, the hardest part of this chapter is when everything starts blurring together and you have to tell these things apart. Notice we have a mixture. There's all sorts of things here. There's acids, there's ionic compounds, and there is molecular/covalent compounds. So you have to be able to tell them apart. The questions on the test will be formatted like this. There will be a name column. There'll be a center column that has whether it's where you put a box for I, M, or A for ionic, molecular, or acid. And then there'll be the side over here that has all of the formulas, and your goal will be to fill in all of the table, all of the blanks that are on there. Now I'm listing them on this side just for my convenience sake, but we're going to kind of work through the strategies you can use. Now I've mentioned this before. The first thing that you want to do, you always want to get done first, is you want to find all of your acids. And the way we find acids is one, it's at the end of their name, so this must be an acid. Or two, it has hydrogens out front. So both of these must also be acids. Again, it's that easy for these. If it has acid at the end of the name or if it has hydrogens out front, you are dealing with an acid. And once you get that, it gets a lot easier from there. So if you're dealing with these types of things, you're dealing with the formulas instead of the names, you're just going to check on the periodic table for that first element. Now, that will work for most cases. I've mentioned in class to a couple of people who've asked me about it. Ammonium is the only exception, this thing right up here, the name. That is the only thing that will screw this up because ammonium would have an N first, even though it is an ionic compound. Thankfully, it would have more than one or more than two elements here. And you can never have more than two elements for a molecular. You can for an acid, but we've already eliminated all of those. And you can for an ionic, which means if there's any left over after you've eliminated acids that have three elements involved in their formula, you have definitely found an ionic compound. But looking at these two, they both have two, so we just have to go to our normal strategy of let's check the first element. Si is a nonmetal. That means that it must be molecular or covalent. And then Pb is a metal, so that means it must be an ionic compound. We'll check out those first pieces. Going up to the top one, there's a couple of different strategies you can use. The first thing that's easy to notice is this right here. You see tetra and you see hepta. There are a couple of polyatomics, specifically dichromate, that have a prefix, but most of the time if you see a prefix here, especially if you see one on the beginning one, that lets you know you have a molecular substance on your hands. But it's not a guarantee. You might still be tripped up by it because there could be one only on the second piece, and you might be wondering, well, is that dichromate? And if it's dichromate, well, then it's got to be ionic. Notice that in this one, we've got a Roman numeral. Roman numerals only ever show up in ionic compounds. So if you see a Roman numeral, you also know you're dealing with an ionic compound. And then finally, ammonium chloride. This one does not have any prefixes, which tells us it's probably ionic. And then if we just check what is ammonium, well, ammonium's a polyatomic. That means it must be ionic. They are polyatomic ions, so they must be ionic compounds. All right, from here, I'm going to, if you want to, pause the video, and I'm going to actually solve each of these out and give you what the answer to each of these are. So this is just some bonus practice if you're in the market for some extra practice problems. I hope you paused it by now. If not, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give you the names for each of these, or the formulas. So ammonium chloride, that's going to be NH4Cl. They each have a 1 charge, so when you cross them, they completely cancel out. Hydrochloric acid, hydro means ain't got no O's, means we've got to be dealing with a single element or a polyatomic that is a smaller one. This is a very small category of them. There's only 3. In this case, it's chloric. Chloric tells us it's Cl. Acid tells us it must start with H. Cl also has a -1 charge, so we need 1 H to balance it out. Tetraboron heptachloride. Tetra means 4, boron means B, so that's 4 Bs. Hepta means 7, chloride means chlorine. That's 7. I just realized I got 3 in a row that all use chlorine. Iron 3 nitride. Iron is Fe. Nitrogen is nitride, and that is N. They both have this is a +3, this is a -3, so when we cross, they completely cancel out. For formulas to names, SiN10, that would be silicone. Doesn't need a prefix because there's only one if it's the first thing. And then it would be decanitride. Deca means 10, nitride meaning nitrogen, and then ide meaning it's attached to the piece before it. H2SO4, we look at SO4. SO4 is sulfate. I ate some acid and it was ic-E, so you will either get sulfic or the more common way is sulfuric acid. PbS2, this one's pretty complicated. Name the first thing, we have lead. Name the second thing, change the ending. Sulfide, not 8. 8s are used for polyatomics, like SO4. This is sulfide. Then does lead need a Roman numeral? And in this case, it does. It is not in the section of the table that always has one expected charge. So we have to look at S. S has a -2 charge, and there are 2 of them, which means our lead must be a +4 charge. And then finally, H tells us it's an acid, so we know the second part of the name is acid. We look at this piece. Sulfur is sulfide. Sulfide without an O, you ain't got no O's. It's got to be hydrosulfuric or hydrosulfic acid. I know that was way faster than any of my other examples, but like I said, this was just bonus practice for you if you need it. There's also, you know, the huge worksheet that you're going to be getting with this that has a whole bunch of practice for you on there. There's also the PowerPoint that you can go back and you can look through and check all of the slides that have example problems there that have the answers on the next slide. So if you have any questions, please shoot me an email. Otherwise, this is Mr. Diamond signing off. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.